I want to welcome my friend, my senator, and our best hope to win in 2020, Senator Cory Booker.
Hello, everybody! All right! So, this is great. Thursday night in a bar, hanging out with some good friends. I cannot tell you, I'm just energized right now. I'm energized by where we are as a nation. And some people say, wait a minute, Cory, you got a president committing moral vandalism in the White House. You've got real challenges. But what I learned from a woman on the 5th floor of the projects in Newark is that hope is the active conviction that despair will not have the last word. And to see, for my team and I, to see the energy growing, the conviction getting stronger, people getting more determined, the movement of our election, the values and the ideas that we've been talking about, these are the kind of things that are really inspiring me. So this is what I'd love to do tonight in a very long venue here. Would I narrow or long? What are we talking about here? Narrow. Yes. My body used to be narrow. It is no longer. So what I'd love to do tonight is I want to approach this maybe different than some of you who listen to other stump speeches. I just want to talk to you about the values and the ideals, the why I'm running. And then we'll do some Q&A the best we can in this format. I'll repeat questions if people are shouting from the back. But I really want you to leave here with an understanding of why I'm in this. Maya Angelou once said, people will often forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so, my mom, when I first started campaigning for a city council seat in Newark, New Jersey, she's like, boy, go out and knock on every single door because who you are speaks so loudly people can't hear what you said. So let's start there with my parents. My dad was born poor to a single mom in a segregated nation, in a segregated area in the mountains of North Carolina. Now, he would heckle me right now if he was in this bar. My dad was a very fun guy, and he would be standing in the back and say, don't tell those people from Iowa I was poor. He'd be like, tell them the truth. I was just Po, P-O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. I was a po boy from North Carolina. And what my dad wanted me to know about his childhood was not about the hardship, not about the pain. His mom got sick when he was young. His grandmother raised him for a while. Then she couldn't take care of him. What my dad wanted me to understand about his childhood was at every point of his life, when things got dark and problematic, people came together to ensure that he never fell through the cracks. My dad was taken in by a family there that ran the funeral home that now are like my family. I called the family took him in, my grandfather and grandmother. The kindness, the decency, and my father had no history of college in his family, but people told him, teachers, public school teachers, you're going to go to college. And when he couldn't afford it, the church took a collection to give him enough money to go down the hill and enroll in an HBCU called North Carolina Central University. Now, this is not an unusual story. Everybody here has gotten to where we are because of people in our family who benefited from the kindness of others. My dad used to tell me this story when I was growing up. He'd be like, son, when I was in my grade school one day, it was the first day of school, and a teacher comes in and she says, class, I want to teach you about self-esteem. And the boys and girls were sitting there all orderly and neat, and he said that Cory, they said, the teacher said, come on now, if you think you're dumb, you think you're stupid, I want you to stand up. And my dad said, we just sat there and looked at her, but she stood there impatiently. And she goes, come on, you think you're dumb, you think you're stupid, stand up. And my father said he finally got a little impatient. He pushed back his chair and stood up proudly. And the teacher said, what's wrong with you, Mr. Booker Boy? You think you're dumb, you think you're stupid? And my dad says, he scratched his head and said, well, shucks, ma'am, I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing. My dad told me that in life people are going to say things about you, talk about you, try to push you down, or even worse, beat you down, but boy, you got to stand up. You got to stand up for who you are, stand up for your values, stand up and remember where you came from, But the best way to stand is to not stand alone. It's to join with other people in the cause of helping other people up. Because the story of my family is just that. You see, when my dad got down the hill to North Carolina Central University, here's a guy who grew up in a segregated town, and suddenly he sees the civil rights movement, where he sees black folks and white folks, Christians and Jews, people coming from all over the country, rural areas, suburban areas, doing freedom rides, doing sit-ins. He saw that the opportunities in this country were opening up for him because of the labors and struggles of people willing to stand for him, often folks that didn't look like him. And you know what? He then gets his first job as IBM's first black salesman in the entire Virginia area because of the advocacy of organizations that came together to fight for a level playing field. He moves up to New Jersey. I don't know if you ever heard of that Mecca of America, New Jersey. Thank you for one New Jersey man. It's like, woo! Bruce Springsteen! In 1969, he goes to move to New Jersey with his wife and his 2 young boys. I was just a baby. And every time he looked at homes in the areas with the best public schools, there were all white communities, and the real estate agents would greet a black family and tell them, lie to my parents, tell them this house is sold, this house is pulled off the market. And my parents were frustrated, they were discouraged, but what did they find? They found a living room where a bunch of Americans met, mostly white folks, neighbors, future neighbors of his, that said, we're not going to let this happen. And they organized a sting operation where my parents would go out to look at a house, they would be told it was sold, and a volunteer white couple, pretending like they were home buyers, would show up to see if the house was for sale or not. In the house I grew up in, my parents were told it was sold, the white couple came, found out it was still for sale, they put a bid on the house, the bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing, the white couple did not show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer. So now, look, now imagine me growing up in this beautiful town and this great opportunity, great school. My dad was upset. He'd be like, boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base, young man. My parents really wanted my brother and I to know that we could not just luxuriate in the blessings that were paid for by other Americans who were willing to struggle and sacrifice and fight for those blessings. That we could not pay those blessings back. That we may drink deeply from these wonderful wells, but there are wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity we didn't dig. And that if you have the privilege of being one of the 4% of the globe's population to call yourself an American, my parents wanted me to know that that came with obligations. And you couldn't pay back the blessings you inherited, you had to pay them forward. And so, I want you all to know that my life has been oriented around that message. My parents instilled in me this understanding of what patriotism is. Patriotism is love of country, but you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And now, I know there's somebody back there singing some Tina Turner. Cory, what's love got to do with it? well, let me tell you right now. Love is not sentimentality. Love is not anemic. Love is not kumbaya. Love is what got white folks and black folks on buses to do freedom rides, knowing those buses would be bombed. Love is what had young men, 19 years old, storming beaches in Normandy, knowing that those first waves of folks, most of them wouldn't make it. Love is what at Stonewall, in the face of police brutality, had people standing up, joining together, and fighting back against that injustice. Love is Seneca Falls, where men and women came together and said, this nation can never be who it says it is. As Susan B. Anthony said, it was we the people that created this nation, not we the male citizens of America. You want to know what love is? Love is fighting. Anybody who's got up early in the morning after 3-4 hours sleep and the second shift that you just finished, to get up and go out and fight for your family, where sometimes you just have to will your feet to the floor. If somebody in this room, or maybe you are that person, knows someone who is home taking care of a child with special needs, or a parent with Alzheimer's, or your spouse who's declining and feels alone and isolated, but yet you still fight forward every day, knowing the definition of courage is that voice at the end of a long day that tells you, keep fighting in the morning, get up and keep on going. But you see, I don't think love is alone and isolated. I'm doing what I'm doing is because I believe more than ever that this is a moment in America where we can't let hate inspire hate in us. We can't let darkness drive us to dark places. Now is the time. We need a revival of civic grace. We need a more courageous empathy for each other. We need to reclaim the definition of patriotism. And so let me tell you, finish my story, my journey. So I did everything my mom and dad told me. I worked hard, played football, was high school All-American. Listen, older I get, the better I was. I went off to play football at Stanford. I tell people all the time, I got into Stanford because of a 4.0 1600. 4.0 yards per carry, 1600 receiving yards. My dad watched me have a great 4 years at Stanford, stayed there, got a master's degree, got a Rhodes Scholarship, studied in Oxford. I come back to Yale Law School. My dad is not happy. He's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get. It's about the service you give. So look, coming out of Yale Law School, I wanted to go to the fight of America. People fought for my housing rights. I am here because people stood up for a family coming from the South and fought for our housing rights. So my first job coming out of law school was as a lawyer for tenant activists, fighting against slumlords. I wanted to go to the front lines of the fight for America. And I'll tell you, we got front lines in rural places, in urban places. We got front lines in suburban places. We got to fight to make this dream real for everybody. That every child in America, no matter what their zip code, has a place that nurtures their genius, not just a public school, but a cathedral of learning. We got to fight for everybody. And so I move into inner city Newark. It's still the neighborhood I live in now, and I tell you, people call it a low-income neighborhood, below the poverty line. I'm the only senator that lives in a neighborhood like that. But I snap back and tell people all the time, in my neighborhood, we don't mistake wealth with worth.
That's right.
That we have glory and divinity in our neighborhood. But I want to be real tonight. And so when I got to that community and started working, I still had a little bit of that Yale Law School swagger, but God always sends somebody to make sure you're not too big for your britches. And my early mentors were people from the community who taught me everything I know about politics. And the moment I want to highlight here and then turn to the larger themes of this campaign is the first tenant meeting I went to with this legendary tenant leader named Frank Hutchins was in the basement of some projects, and it was packed like this room, except for we had one of the worst slumlords there were, who was stealing, I say that confidently because eventually we got him convicted in federal court, federal dollars to subsidize that housing, but defraying investments in those buildings, and the buildings were in horrific shape. They would literally be the buildings I would move into sooner than later. But this is my first tenant meeting, and all I need to do is collect information because we're going to file a lawsuit against this slumlord, and we're in the basement, room like this. I just need to get some facts, testimony, file my complaint. In the first half hour, I had everything I needed, but the meeting went on and on and on. But this guy, Frank Hutchins, every time a person came up to the microphone to speak, he looked at that person as if they were the first person that spoke in the night. Well, the meeting went on for hours, and eventually we're leaving, and I say an impetuous thing to him as we're walking out about complaining about how long the meeting was. And this great elderly tenant leader stops and looks at me with this gentility and kindness and says, "You don't understand. We're taking on a powerful, wealthy slumlord. And we need to repair these buildings. But in order to do that, we have to first repair community." Every one of those people who came up tonight has been hurting, private pain, but they deserve to be seen, they deserve to be heard. And if we can organize these buildings, if we can repair community, tighten the bonds between us, we will have all the strength we need to take on this powerful man, because I learned from them that the power of the people is always greater than people in power. And so that's the story right there. My whole career has been about that. Facing down some of the toughest problems. I became mayor of New Jersey's largest city in the middle of a recession, with a city with one of the higher poverty rates in our country. After 60 years of losing population and losing its financial base, declining after its riots in the 60s. And people told me all the problems we couldn't solve, how people have tried it before. And every time I said, I am not going to do this. It's not me, it's we. We're going to create uncommon coalitions, and we're going to create uncommon results. Well, fast forward after my second term, when I was going on to be a United States Senator, and that city that had 60 years of economic decline was now in its biggest economic development period in 60 years. It was literally creating tens of thousands of new jobs. Our first new hotels built in decades, our first new office towers with companies moving back, entrepreneurs starting up, women, often minority women who never had access to capital. We got them seed money, started businesses around our city. We took our school system from one of the lowest performing urban districts in New Jersey to now the #1 school system in America for beat the odds schools, kids in poverty going on to college. But this is not just my story. It's not just Newark's story. It's not just how the only major bipartisan bill to pass under this president was the one that I led in the United States Senate for criminal justice reform. It's not just my story. It is our story. This is how we in America have done big things before. I love rugged individualism and self-reliance. They are important values for everyone in this room. But rugged individualism didn't get us to the moon. Rugged individualism didn't beat the Nazis. We do those things when we pull our nation together across the lines that divide us and affirm the ties that bind us. And so, I want to tell you, I hear a lot of good policy. Some of my close friends are in this race. I just lost another close friend from this race. This is not a matter of policy, it's an issue of vision. Because we right now will not be able to meet the scourge of global climate change, or even do things like pass comprehensive gun safety in this country unless we create unity in this nation, common cause, common purpose, unless we put more indivisible back into this one nation under God. And so let me tell you about that right now. We as Democrats have to be careful. We cannot make this election about what we're against. We got to make it about what we're for and who we're for. I'm sorry. As much as I will join you in anger and hurt and even rage on some days about one person in the White House, this election is not a referendum simply on him. It is a referendum on us and who we're going to be to each other. And let me tell you, Democrats, I know the partisanship in our country is deepening. It's getting to a point of tribalism. I know I heard stories about Thanksgiving dinners, arguments breaking out. And the way to solve that is not to contribute to it. That doesn't mean not to be strong. It doesn't mean not to stand your ground on issues of conscience. But I'm telling you, if we frame this election as beating Republicans, we will lose. If we frame this election as the urgent need to unite Americans, that's how we win. Because we are still one nation. nation under God. We still have common cause. And let me tell you, some people are like, oh, Cory, those are nice sentiments, but come on now. How do you beat Donald Trump by being nice? And I'm like, when's the last time you looked at our history? Come on now. I was running for one of my early trips to Iowa as a candidate. I've been coming here all my life. My grandmother was born and raised in Des Moines. My family originally is from Buxton, Iowa. For those of you who don't know where that is, come up to me afterwards. But I was running up for a debate stage. I'm about to jump on the stage. Big guy sees me. As I've already told you, I'm a big guy. Former tight end for Stanford University. The older I get, the better I was. We've covered this already. And I'm about to jump on the stage, and the big guy puts his arm around me, just in a moment of just true testosterone. Says to me, dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face. And I look at him and I go, dude, that's a felony. You do not beat hate with hate. You do not beat darkness with darkness. Our history shows a different story. We beat McCarthy when a senator finally cried out for decency, and we rejected that darkness. We didn't beat Bull Connor because we brought bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses. We beat them because of artists of activism that called to the conscience of a country, and we responded. More people got off the sidelines and got off the couches and got engaged and got involved. This is how things used to happen. We had moments like this one that were moral moments in America. When 4 girls died in a bombing in Birmingham, it woke the conscience of our country. And people rejected what was and demanded what must be. We changed laws. Civil rights legislation, voting rights legislation. Let me go back another generation. When women were throwing themselves out windows in the shirtwaist factory fire, dying on the pavement below because of horrific sweatshop conditions, this whole country responded. We demanded change. We got active and engaged, and we brought about a more just nation. But now, what are we doing on our watch? When they get slaughtered in a synagogue in Pittsburgh or a church in South Carolina, and nothing changes in our laws. When they get killed at a concert in Las Vegas or nightclub in Orlando, and nothing changes. When they are killing our children, shooting them under their desks from Parkland to Newtown. When 90% of Americans agree on common sense gun safety reforms. And our response is to send our children to school with the implicit message that we can't protect you, so when you get there, we're going to teach you how to hide. There are more active shooter drills in the United States of America right now than there are fire drills. More shelter-in-place drills, and I have been broken. I tell you, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. I have been broken in town hall after town hall. I still remember the teacher in Pennsylvania. I still remember the student telling stories about these moments when the alarm bells go off and they don't know what it is. Is it real? Is it a drill? And they knock over desks. One student told me about arming themselves with bandstands. With one woman told me about pushing as a teacher her whole desk in front of a table, about the trauma that has to our children, that the strongest nation in the land, that we do not respond by protecting our kids. I've had enough of this. I go home to one of America's inner cities. Yeah, I told you this. I live in a neighborhood below the poverty line, and I'm tired because I know children that have been murdered. Shahad Smith, Hassan Washington, I watched them grow up. Shahad was killed last year with an assault rifle on my block. Why am I running for president? I'm running because I know our history, I know our decency, I know the power of American love. It has changed this planet before, and now more than ever, we need the best of who we are. And out-Trump Donald Trump. You win an election by calling to the best of who we are as a country. It's about our values. It's about our heart. It's about our grit. It's about how we fight. It's about how we win. We fight and we win together. end with this, because I want to put it on you. I really do. Yeah. This for me is not a me, it's a we. I've said this in when I started knocking on doors as a city council candidate, I'm saying the same thing I said back then. If you elect me, I'm warning you. I know a lot of people stand up and they make a bunch of promises. I'm giving you a warning. Yeah, I'll talk about my football career. That's not the warning. No, the warning I want to give you is that if you elect me your president, I'm going to ask more from you than any president has ever asked from you in your lifetime. And I'm going to do it not because I'm not asking to pay more taxes. Heck, my tax plan gives 150 million Americans a pay raise effectively. No, what I'm asking is to understand how we have taken on tough challenges before and overcome them and beat them. The only way we've ever done that is together. My grandmother, my Des Moines born and raised grandma, she bragged to me till the day she died about the war effort and how everybody was there. She had a victory garden that she was so proud of. She bought war bonds as a working class family. Because every American, when we had a cause that was great, we joined together, black and brown and white, disabled American, Jew, Hindu, Muslim, we joined together. And this to me is the moment. This is why this point is so important to me, because from climate change to a healthcare system that doesn't leave out millions of Americans, these problems are going to be difficult. Anybody who stands up and says they're going to be easy and riffs off some points of a policy plan, dag-nab, we've lost so many elections with candidates with better policy plans than the person that actually won. This needs to be a movement election, and that's why you are so important. I love Iowa because right now I was talking to some members of the media today. We're like, well, what about the polls, Cory? And I'm like, God bless America. I mean, come on. When has Iowa listened to the polls? John Kerry at this point was polling around 4%, and he went on to win here in Iowa. Some guy who married up. I miss Obama. I miss Obama, and I miss her husband too. Around this time, he was about 20 points behind Hillary Clinton. That's not what wins in Iowa. Polling numbers don't. In fact, listen to this statistic. In none of the lifetimes of people here has anybody ever been leading in the polls at this point in the Democratic Party and going on to be president of the United States. Think about it. Go back. Let's start with Carter. He was polling around 1% right now in the back of the field. Some guy, people call him the first black president. I'm talking about Bill Clinton. He was polling around 4% right now. The polls have not predicted who from our party would go to the president. The people have. And so this is where I need your help. Because right now, all of a sudden we have debate stages where they've created new rules never existed before, where you got to be up in the polls at a certain level. Come on. You could do that if you had $1 billion and run ads over and over again on TV. I don't know if you all have seen any of those. On this tour, at a time that we are in the top few in net favorabilities in the state of Iowa, at the time when we lead with one other candidate in the most endorsed campaign from local leaders, mayors in the state reps in the state, at a time that we have an incredible organization that local news outlets call one of the top 2 grassroots organizations in this campaign, we're running here to win, but we need your help. 2 ways we need your help. One is, if that poll call comes and you see your caller ID, answer the phone, please. Answer the phone. As I think somebody from the Iowa starting line said, just say Cory's name because he should be on the next debate stage. We need your help there. But where we need your help more is when you leave here, if you believe in me that this election is not just about the head and the policy, but about the heart and the spirit, join our movement. We're growing in this race. Somebody told me a data point today that we are the campaign that has most campaign donations from Iowa women. I like that. Thank you, ladies. We are growing our movement in this campaign, but we need you on board. This is the most important election of our lifetime. And if you agree that this is the most important election of our lifetime, we all got to act like it and get behind the candidates that we believe can best ignite the aspirational nature of our party, because we don't win when we play it safe. We win when we tell America we're the party of aspiration, we're the party of the future, we're the party of better days ahead, we're the party of unity, we're the party of hope, we're the party of love. And with that, I want to tell you the story that ends it all. It's about you, but it's also about us. That great leader I told you about, the Frank Hutchins, a tenant leader that had that kindness. Well, he eventually got sick. He pushed me into politics. I was not planning on a life in politics. I was planning on being a nonprofit lawyer, but he saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And then when I was running for city council in the lowest income ward of a low income city, he knocked on doors for me and walked me around. This is how elections are won. And he would put his reputation, when the door would open, people would recognize him, they didn't recognize me. And I had a big old pretty afro back then, guys. But he put his reputation on the line. I am where I am today because of the sacrifices of this man. When I became mayor, that's when he got sick, and it was 10 years ago that he was in hospice. And I visited the hospice, and by the way, hospice workers, healthcare workers, home healthcare workers, these are the angels amongst us. And sometimes we don't know it until we need them. And so they told me this would be the last time I would see him alive. And I walked in as the mayor of the city now. And I walk in, and he had gone blind. So I announced myself. Frank, it's Cory. And they told me he couldn't talk, but as soon as he heard it's Cory, he forced out the words, "I see you." I sat by his bed, and knowing that this would be the last time, I just told him I loved him. I told him how much he transformed my life. I told him not all the great policy we were doing. We were doubling the production of affordable housing in Newark. No, I talked to him about the values and the virtues that he taught me. Well, I was mayor of the city. I was busy. At some point, I knew I had to leave, and I kissed him on the forehead, kissed him on the cheek. I said, "Frank, I gotta go, but Frank, one more time, I love you." And as I'm getting up, I see him working to get the words out. His body is weak, but he's determined, and he says the words, "I love you." Look, this is an amazing nation. We have dazzled humanity together, but we still have a lot of work to do. I want to answer your questions now about any policy issue you want to talk about, but I want to leave you with those last words of my great mentor. I see you, I love you. I see you, I love you. We sing our national anthem with Home of the Brave at the end, but yet our veterans come home and they're disproportionately homeless. Yeah. I see you, I love you. The land of the free. 4% of the globe's population, but 1 out of every 3 incarcerated women on the planet Earth is here. With a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. I see you, I love you. We can't have people in the shadows. Everyone deserves our light. We can't be a party that tears people up when we desperately tear people down, when we desperately need to lift people up. I see you, I love you. That's the spirit, that's the heart, that's the grit of America, and that's how we'll beat Donald Trump, and that's how we'll make sure our tomorrows are better than our yesterdays. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. All right. That's how we'll rise. All right. So, thank you. So let's try. I've never had this challenge before. Is there a mic runner? There's just one mic. All right, so you're going to have to use your outside voice. You're going to have to use the voice that you've used before when you're at the bar, it's crowded, it's crazy, the bartender pays no attention to you, and you use the voice to say, hey, please, give that man from Jersey a beer. No, I'm joking. So I'm going to go right here first. I will repeat the question. Go ahead.
Senator, I hope that you are the candidate. You're doing a fantastic job. My question is, I think that the majority of people in this country are good and don't support Donald Trump and don't support the policies of Donald Trump. But between gerrymandering, the Electoral College, and Citizens United, we don't want to say. The majority has no say. We are being run by a disenfranchised minority.
Did you guys hear it in the back there at all? So for you in the back, she said, how is it that a man as handsome as you, that Rosario has not said yes? No, her question really goes to the core. I love when people get to the root of all other problems. She said, you know, she believes that we are a good nation filled with good people. But when you have a system that's so corrupted by gerrymandering, by post-Citizens United with all the dark money flowing in, the way the district lines are being drawn, there's so many anti-democratic forces that make it really hard for the good people, the majority of us, to get big things done. And she wants to know, what do I think about that? What am I willing to do about that?
What do you think can be done on a federal level if you're elected?
Yes. So there's two things I want to say to this. What can be done on the federal level? So the first thing is obvious, but every candidate is going to tell you this. We need to end Citizens United. We need to pass legislation. We need to have massive campaign finance reform. We need to end gerrymandering. We need to make sure on the federal level, on the presidential level, the person with the most votes is the person who wins their office. Okay. But I want to be honest with everybody here. Most of my friends on the debate stage will say the same answer with the same enthusiasm and the same will. But now let me go to the hard part. How did we put as the first piece of legislation in the House of Representatives? I say we, I'm not part of Team Nancy, I'm part of Team Chuck in the Senate as a senator. But Nancy Pelosi was able to finally introduce a comprehensive reform package that included things about taking on gerrymandering, voting rights, and more. Now, she passed it, but it's dying on Mitch McConnell's desk. Hold on. So this is the question. I hate to say this, and I hate to steal the words of a wise man with a better haircut, but don't boo, vote. This is the point here. When we had a record voter turnout in 2018, it was one of the greatest turnouts of Americans in a midterm election ever. We took back state houses, we took back state legislatures, and we elected a new house that, by the way, is so representative, gender-wise, most women we've ever had in the house. How did we do it? We did it by getting out and getting active and voting. Civil rights legislation failed so many times. It took a movement of Americans finally to get engaged to pass it. The longest filibuster in the Senate history is Strom Thurmond. And we didn't pass civil rights legislation because one day he came to the Senate floor and say, I've seen the light, let some Negro people have some rights. No, it was people from Iowa, people from this state going on freedom rides and doing the activism. So this is why I say that as your candidate, two things are going to happen. One, if I'm your nominee, this is why these issues matter, diversity matters, because to beat Mitch McConnell, we got to pick up Senate seats in North Carolina, Arizona, South Carolina. Georgia has 2 Senate seats up. The only way we do that is getting record turnouts, especially amongst African Americans. Kentucky. Let me tell Kentucky, thank you very much. Now people are going to be like, Maine, every state that has a Senate race. But let me be very clear with you, and I want to be honest. It's very important who we choose at the top of the ticket. Obama, you all sent him to the White House, being the first folks to do it, and that's why I want to give all of Iowa a hug. But Obama in 12 and 8 got record turnouts in general, but he particularly got record turnouts in African American voters. We lost Pennsylvania, in the presidential election in 2016, Wisconsin and Michigan by 77,000 votes. And now this is something folks don't talk about enough. The African American vote went down in this country by about 1 million people. In those 3 states alone, in Milwaukee, for example, there were 70,000 less African Americans that came to the polls. If we elect a candidate that can't authentically connect with the fullness of our coalition, we're not going to put the lead. We're not going to take. We may win the White House, but we're not going to take back the United States Senate. So I want you to know that I'm running because I think I can ignite that Obama coalition again and get people to the polls at levels that have not been seen before. And then when I win the nomination, then when I win the election, before I'm sworn in, I'm turning to the Democratic Party and saying enough of this. Enough of us thinking our time is done and sending one person to the White House thinking our problems are solved. No, I'm turning to the Democratic Party and saying it's time for a 50-state strategy here in our country for the Democratic Party, because Texas is a blue state. Iowa is a blue state. These are states that we've got people activated. And what will happen to the Republican Party for their own salvation is they're going to move and become a party that will stand up for the issues that we care about, because their base from gun safety, their base wants it, to all the way to even things like marijuana legalization. Young Republicans overwhelmingly support things like that. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to try a distance one before I come back right here in front of me, and I'm not going to ignore behind me to some of the people back there. So let's go to the distance one. Why don't you yell at me? Yes, you're the hand up.
So I'm a newly elected member of the school board here in town. So education funding is near and dear to my heart. I have 2 questions for you.
Yes.
One, where do you stand on voucher programs? And 2, a lot of candidates talk about pre-K and college funding. What are you going to do to increase K through 12 funding in all the states?
Okay, great questions. Did you hear him back in this corner? She definitely used her outside voice. No wonder you won a school board race. Okay, look, the voucher schemes that I've seen, like the one that was proposed in this state, would not help folks. When we were I'm actually one of those candidates that actually took responsibility for a school system. So it's just not on my watch. We're not going to do things that enable Republicans to try to defund public education, privatize it, separate us more than we are. Often you see more racial segregation in many of these plans. So let's just dispense with that really quickly. But again, we are a party united in a lot of those views. And so, but the next question is really important about the plan to increase funding through K through 12. Now I know you told me, Cory, not preschool, but I just want to say, just for the record, for everybody that's in here, it is shameful that this country does not take care of its children in a way as a national thing until they get to kindergarten. And it's the reason why, this is a terrible statistic, but we lead all industrial nations in infant mortality, low birth weights, maternal mortality, because we don't have universal prenatal care. And we don't realize we're paying more for it. The complications at birth cost us more. It would be cheaper to give every low-income or at-risk woman doula care, as my plan talks about, than it would be to pay what we're paying right now. And the most important investments to give kids, look, 90% of brain development happens between the womb and the 5th year. But now a kid comes into the world and we're like, okay, well, childcare, sorry, it's going to be as expensive in most states as college tuition at state colleges. Outrageous. Then we say to families, hey, if you get sick, one of my friends, Natasha, worked at an IHOP across the street from a hospital in Newark. Her son was with an asthma attack. And for black kids, they die at 10 times the rate of white kids for asthma complications. And now she's got to make a decision, and many women in this room know. Do I stay here to keep this paycheck that I really need to make my car payment or my rent payment? Or do I leave and sacrifice this paycheck but be there for my child when they're in crisis? How can we be the only nation that does not have paid family leave? Afghanistan and the Congo have paid family leave, yet we're the only industrial nation that doesn't have it. So it is about understanding that this is our greatest natural resource, the genius of our children: prenatal care, affordable child care, paid family leave, universal preschool. We must have them, and I will fight to the mat to make sure we do. Now, K through 12, this is what we're going to do very simply. First of all, for our public school professionals, I don't just say teachers, because there are school counselors, school nurses, there are people in those buildings that are essential to our children's success. If you are a public school professional in those buildings, then we're going to make sure that we give you an effective tax rate. I don't even need to get 60 votes in the Senate. I can do this through reconciliation, just like they forced that toxic Trump tax cut down our throats. I can do this by creating a new tax bracket where remember, we have hedge fund workers that are paying a smaller percentage of their income and salary than their secretaries. That's going to stop under my watch. But we are now going to create for public school professionals a lower tax bracket, so you're paying less in taxes, and thereby your salaries are going to increase for everyone. And we're going to forgive your college loans, and we're going to do more to make that profession great. And then the second and last thing I'm going to say, because it's not talked about enough, are beautiful children who happen to have disabilities. We do not fully fund special education in this country. The federal government has never met its commitment. It's about 18% of what its commitment should be, at around 40%. I'm going to fully fund special education, and you know this from being a school board member. That's going to push millions of dollars to localities all across this country of the resources they need for their schools and for all of their children. All right, thank you. All right, what's your name?
My name's Dixie. Do you remember me?
I recognize you from the stage, and I'm glad you got a front row seat. So thank you so much. Why don't you ask your question, because folks can hear you.
My question is that both farmers and ranchers all over the country get their income, not just from the United States of America, but from a lot of other places. And in this 4 years that we're going through now, a lot of them are losing that business. Part of it is because of the actions of the person they have to deal with. Part of it is because of the fact that the people he puts in his cabinet don't know boo from Sikkim about whatever. So
I'm sorry, I'm from New Jersey. What does it mean, boo from Sikkim? I think I get the meaning. I love that. I'm going to go back home to Newark and walk around saying, you don't know boo from Sikkim.
But so anyway, I'm wondering, how do you think that you can improve the relationships of the people who were our friends that he's making enemies, and not make the enemy still be our enemy, but not let them. Right now, I think they're taking advantage of us, but we need to get the farmers and the ranchers back where they can deal internationally and not just here.
This is an important question because it speaks to a crisis going on in America right now. We have a massive disappearance of independent family farmers. People losing their farms that they've been on since the 1800s. We have suicide rates amongst farmers at alarming levels. And there doesn't seem to be an outcry nationally. This is what I'm talking about, where we have a nation that's too divided, where we don't. That's why we need this more courageous empathy to see the struggle. And so I want to answer your foreign policy question, but I also want to talk about domestic policy. So your foreign policy question is simple. Please don't be fooled by what Donald Trump says, America first. If he was really talking about that, I'm not one of these reflexively partisan people. I'd be with him. But I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee. And we have so many bipartisan times, a couple times where we rebuke the president on his foreign policy because his America First policy is really an America isolated and alone policy.
Yeah.
And what he's done, first of all, we're seeing it on a national stage right now, international stage. I can't believe he has a better relationship with Putin than he does with Macron and Merkel. I mean, this is a president that is pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, pulling out of the Iran deal, doing all of these things to make us more isolated. But to your point, he takes on a fight with China. And by the way, I hope we all know, China is unfairly competing. And they are. They're stealing our technology. They're forced transfers of technology. They're manipulating their currency. They should be taken on. We do owe them too much money. That's another question. You only get one nowadays. So this is akin to me in a really tough fight. Stanford just lost to Notre Dame. I know you all are upset about that. Oh my gosh. And so It would be like me back when we played Notre Dame, and I had my best career game ever, and we upset them when they were #1. It'd be akin to me saying to my offense, all you guys stay on the sidelines, I'm going to take on Notre Dame alone. Our president has basically said, China, we're going to fight you, but at the same time, we're going to be putting tariffs on France. We're going to be putting tariffs on England. We're going to put tariffs on Canada. This is the truth. He used a national security waiver to put tariffs on Canada. Now, I don't know last time you checked, but they're not really that menacing of a national security threat to us. I mean, Trudeau's hair is offensive to me. It's so beautiful. But they are not a national security threat. So at the same time, we should be joining with our allies. What we're doing by putting tariffs on these other countries is we're harming our own farmers. Because now they're losing out on international markets unnecessarily. And this is the hard part of your question, because she specifically asked, what can you do to repair those relationships? Well, Trump is causing a lot of work for President Booker because what he's doing is, as soon as these markets decide to go someplace else for their soybeans, and for you, those people who are worried about climate change, the Amazon is being torn down for what? For soybeans. When we have spot, we could be selling here in America. And so once those relationships are made, it's hard to see them coming back. So this president is doing permanent damage to our farming sector, hurting people, hurting international markets, and not winning against China, as he said he would be. He said we would get so tired of winning. Well, I don't see any wins that he's got for us internationally. The Middle East is more dangerous. North Korea still has its nuclear weapons. Russia is getting more audacious in their activism in Europe. And so the last part of the question I want to say for you, because it's domestic policy too. When I talk to farmers, I'm going to be meeting with the Farmers Union tomorrow. When I met with farmers years ago, one of the reasons why I'm the champion in the Senate for farm reform is because when I hear this, is that farmers in our country are being squeezed by corporate oligarchies, multinational corporations. First, their source products, their seeds and their chemicals are going up because companies like Monsanto have bought up all these other companies and raised their prices. Then they used to have many different companies to sell to, but now they've all conglomerated and they have one choice. They're getting squeezed from below and above and below. The farmer's share, when you go to the supermarket and buy your tomato or buy your a steak, if you're a vegan, buy your tofu. The farmer's share of the consumer dollar has gone down about 50% on many products. And that's unacceptable. And so I've already put in legislation as a senator from New Jersey, putting a moratorium on corporate conglomeration in the farm sector. And if I'm your president, I'm coming after these multinational corporations and returning us to the kind of farming that made Iowa strong and vibrant. All right, I think I said I'd go behind me. Sir, I hope you don't mind yielding to the gentleman behind you first. All right, go ahead, sir.
What's President Booker's energy policy look like?
He said, if you didn't hear about him, is where is President Booker going to get his energy from? No, I'm sorry. President Booker's energy policy is what he wants to know about. So look, we have a crisis in this planet called climate change. And it does not have to be a threat to our economy. It could be the hope of our economy. And when I was mayor, remember, a lot of these folks who come around campaigning for president, climate change didn't start yesterday. Ask them what they've been doing about it for the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. When I was mayor, I told my team in City Hall that this was going to be an opportunity, and everything that we did was going to be with a green lens. And so we created job programs for installing solar panels and environmentally retrofitting buildings. When we did that, we lowered energy costs for my taxpayers. When we did that, we improved the environment even in Newark by making it less warm in our city, where city's a heat island. We created jobs, expanded opportunities, even created apprenticeship programs for our kids. So you want to know what my energy policy is? It's for America to lead the planet out of crisis by seizing new opportunities, new industries, new businesses, and new breakthroughs that ensure we continue to lead economically as well as lead for the righteous cause of saving our planet. And that means a lot of things. That means, number one, changing the way we work. Our farmers are part of the solution. If we start, and this is my plan called, has a big part for a role for farmers like we see here in the Midwest and here in Iowa, which is to start incentivizing them to do cover crops and things that pull carbon out of the air, and the no-till practices and more that we know can work. And if farmers have the programs to incentivize that, they'll do better. It means making sure that we stop the subsidies on fossil fuels that are helping to drive this crisis and helping companies like Chevron pay nothing in taxes. And we turn those subsidies to renewables. It means we turn to great universities like ones in this state and double down on the research for the innovations of the future, whether it's in battery technology and storage, or whether it's in new farming practices that are going to help us. America cannot let other countries beat us to the solutions of the future and the new energy of the future, and then we're following and dependent upon them. I will make sure that we lead in solving this climate crisis, but lead in a way that empowers us to make sure that our economy thrives, make sure it's more inclusive to people that are often left out of the equation, and ultimately make sure that not only is America continue to be an energy leader in the world, but again, it goes to a planet-saving leader like we have been in generations past as well. All right, one more question, but these two men right here were both asking this question. This guy was shaking his head at me with this look. That was, sir, so I'm going to go to you first, and then I'm going to go to the gentleman here, and then we're done, okay? All right, what's your name? Yell it out.
My name's Alex Ferreira. I'm from San Carlos, Arizona. I'm from the San Carlos Apache Tribe Reservation. And my question is, how do you plan on empowering Native Americans in this country? We're 1% of this. We're 1% of this nation. We're rarely ever talking about here in Iowa. But you know what? How do you plan on
Yell your name out one more time.
Alex Ferreira.
So Alex, everybody, is Native American from Arizona, and he says, hey, what do you plan on doing with the 1% of this nation that are Native Americans, and partnering with them? And so Alex, first and foremost, I have a very simple philosophy. It can't be about you without you. And it means that we need to make sure that we have a table that includes Native Americans, and they're shaping policy and not waiting for the presidents to do so. Let me tell you something. When I went to the United States Senate, I got in and I couldn't believe it. I'm a new senator, and I looked at that place and I'm like, this is one of the least diverse places I've ever been. The Senate staffs, the gender diversity was awful. And so I went to Chuck Schumer, our leader in the Democratic caucus, and I said, you have got to get every senator to publish their diversity statistics. And just by them doing that, now guess what's happened to the number of women and minorities hired in the Senate? It's gone up. And so I want you to know that I come from New Jersey, but as a senator, I talk about this interdependency, I talk about this intersectionality. I've done a lot to learn about Native issues. And what I see right now is we have a nation that still isn't respecting the tribal sovereignty of Native Americans, still doesn't have a compassion or empathy for what's happening to Native American women, the violence and the disappearances that we see going on, that still doesn't care about the rates of poverty that are striking Native American communities, doesn't even have an articulated strategy to empower Native communities who are poor because of generational injustices that have been heaped upon them by this very nation. And so I want you to know that as your president, I'm going to have Native Americans part of my advisory team, helping to shape the very policy so that we have a strategy to do something about it, and a determination and an American will to not just see Native Americans are not a problem to be solved. They're fellow Americans, and we need to lead the way on issues that matter to them and frankly to many other communities in our country. Thank you. All right. I learned to read a look, and I can tell that's not going to be an easy question. So let's end on a good note, sir. Come on. And use your voice. Come on, man. We can't have the loudest voice being this incredible elected school board member. You got to try to challenge her for that title.
Hello, Senator Booker. My name's Graham. I'm a lifelong resident of the state of Nebraska. My question for you is, so you joined Senator Markey and AOC in supporting the Green New Deal. I have a father, a brother, and an aunt who all work in the natural gas industry. What is your plan in the Booker administration if the Green New Deal becomes law and transfers 100% of the renewable energy by
2045.
Right. Okay.
2045. That's my plan.
So
what's the plan for? This is a really important question. Can I repeat it so people hear it? So he has family members. Your father, your brother. You said three.
Father, brother, and aunt.
Your father, brother, his father, brother, and aunt work in the natural gas industry right now, And he said, hey, Cory, you're a believer in transitioning our economy off of fossil fuels by 2045 to meet the global climate issues. What does that mean for my family? And I want to be very blunt. This is where the Democratic Party has failed on coal miners, on natural gas workers, on people who work at oil companies and oil industries, by making them feel like they're the enemy, when right now natural gas workers are fueling so much of our society. And this is the two words that I use all the time. It's called just transition. You can't transition away in the next 20 plus years and not have a plan to deal with those folks who have been fueling the energy of our country for all along. And so I believe in just transition, and I believe that we make a mistake if we don't have a vision that's not just inclusive of folks like your family, but that they get excited about and what the promise and the hope is. And so for me, that just transition looks like a lot of things. Number one, it is investing in, and by the way, some other countries do this really well, like Switzerland, and the kind of programs that help people who are leaving jobs that are going away go into apprenticeship programs that actually use some of the skills that are skill related, that pay them so they can earn while they learn. Not their salaries go down to minimum wage or something their family's in crisis, but sustains them as they transition into a new green economy. Because we know that there are high-paying jobs here. Already we're seeing them. I'm learning things in Iowa when I visit about the high-paying job for engineers that work on wind turbines. There are jobs that are related to the jobs that your families are doing in the new energy economy, but we cannot leave anyone behind. And when the Democratic Party does that, for shame. When the Democratic Party endorsed trade deals that hurt American workers without having a plan for those American workers, we deserve to have them turn against us as a party. And so I celebrate what your family does. They are not the villains. They are Americans who are helping to fuel the things that we take for granted. And my plan as we transition is to make sure that your family doesn't just have a pathway forward, but something that excites their imagination and their hope for their children and their children's children, okay? Well, I want to end with just this. I keep pushing it on you, and I want to end again. If you believe in what I'm doing, please, are my organizers around here, are they all on this end, or are there some of them on that end? There's some over there. Oh, there they are. I see those. Go up to one of these people. They are incredible folks. I haven't gotten any of them to shave their heads yet, but you will. Oh my God! What? I love that. But this is on you, and I want to end with this addendum to the story I told before. And it's actually one of my favorite moments from before I was born. But it's simply this. I told you about those groups that helped my family move into New Jersey. And one of them was a lawyer that organized the sting operation. Well, when I got to the Senate, I decided to do what a lot of senators do that have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And by the way, if your name is Booker, it's a lot of pressure, everybody. And so I needed to get the facts right. So I went back to find the guy who designed the whole sting operation and everything that enabled my family to move into the community I grew up in, change my life trajectory, everything. And so I find him, and I call him up, and he confirms all the facts I need for my chapter, but the more he talked, the more I had one question for this American. Why? I just need to understand this, because he had just started his business, he was struggling to make it, and he was trying to provide for his young family, and so I finally just said, hey, why would you spend so much time trying to help black families move into your neighborhood at a time of fears of white flight, at a time that people were afraid of real estate prices going down? And he goes, Cory, let me tell you the moment I made the decision. I'm like, tell me this. And he goes, it was March 7th, 1965. And I'm like, that's very specific, sir. And he goes, I'm sitting on my couch watching TV, and I know the movie he was watching. I looked it up. This is actually a very historic day. Most of them, and by the way, this is back when we had 3 channels, everybody. Hardship. Hardship. At 11 o'clock, what would happen? It'd go off. All the young people are looking at me, I don't know. What happened? What'd you all do? They're like crying for us. It was so hard back then. So hard. Making fun of us old people. There were no Uber Eats. What did you do? And so he was watching a movie, for those of you who are a little older in this room, finish the title for me. It was called Judgment at Nuremberg, right. Most of America, on March 7th, 1965, was watching this movie called Judgment at Nuremberg. And here is this American man in the suburbs, started a small business, small law firm, and he's just home on a Sunday, long week behind him, long week ahead of him, and he's just watching TV, and then he says something happens. They break away from an ongoing movie to show something going on in America that had everybody's attention. It was Alabama. There was this bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And he watches from his seat a couch in New Jersey as 1,000 miles away, these marchers that started in Selma were now trying to march to Montgomery, and they get stopped on the bridge by Alabama state troopers who would not let them pass. And then he watches in horror about what happens next. And it's why we call this day now in America Bloody Sunday. Because they shot tear gas at the marchers who started scrambling, and then on horseback and other men running in with billy clubs drawn, the marchers get trampled, and the billy club wielders just start beating people over the head. Men, women, and children. One of those marchers, always my hero, now he's my colleague in the Congress. His name is John Lewis. But here's the question. What does a white guy on a couch 1,000 miles away in New Jersey do? Does he allow his inability to do everything to undermine his determination to do something? No. Does he just sit there and say, that's a shame, somebody should do something about that? No. He stands up in what is still one of the greatest of American traditions. He stands up and says, I gotta help. But he knew he couldn't go to Alabama. He couldn't afford a plane ticket, not to mention close his business. So what he did, what that tradition in our country is, he decided at that moment that he would do the best he can with what he had, where he was. And he called around to see who might need a little bit. He thought he could spend an hour of pro bono work a week. And he found this young woman. She's now 93 years old. I called her a few days ago. She was leading a small group of people that just wanted to do something about housing discrimination. And by the way, that 93-year-old woman is still the head of this organization today. And he said, well, I'm going to help you. And they went on, and they started scheming, and they designed this sting operation. And the next thing you know, 65 turns to 67, and now they get more people involved. And now it turns to 1969, and he says, I remember getting this case file from this family moving up from the South. They were discouraged, and they were frustrated. They didn't know what to do. And then we helped them, Cory. We helped them move into a home. And you know what the names on that case file were? And I go, no, sir, I don't. He goes, the two names on that case file were Carrie and Carolyn Booker, your parents. I am here, a United States Senator, only the fourth black person ever elected to that office. I'm running for the highest office in the land and could be the first descendant of slaves ever to go into the White House built by slaves. All of this is happening because one guy on a couch in New Jersey stood up and understood his power to make a difference in America. That it is not waiting for a president or waiting for a senator, but that we, the people in this great democracy, we have the power. And so tonight I'm going to ask you, do not underestimate what you do between now and February 3rd about the difference you can make. This is an election that is a moral moment in our country. And you have to decide, what will I do? What's the best I can do with what I have right here where I am? And I promise you, if we as a people don't lose this moment, if we stand up, as my dad would say, and stand together and join arms and work, not just for our head, but the heart and the soul of this nation. If you'll join me in this cause, if you'll stand with me in this fight, we will win here in Iowa. And just like presidents have passed, we will chart a course to the White House. But that's not the end we seek. It's not the position that we seek. It's the larger purpose that is our calling. And that purpose is that this country, even in the darkest, most difficult times, even when somebody tries to demean, degrade, and divide us, that we may stumble, we may fall low, but I promise you, if we come together and commit ourselves, recommit ourselves tonight, I promise you, we will not stumble and fall, that we as a nation, together, we will rise. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not leaving. I want to take selfies if I can. Please come say hello.